Hey, welcome to United Opposition. We're here talking about the Trump conviction. Yeah, we're gonna hit that. You ready for that, Marshall?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right, here we go. Hey, welcome to United Opposition with Scott and
Marshall.
I don't know which side of the screen you're on. I'm pointing to both sides because on the side you're here.
You got it right the first time.
I got it right the first time. Okay, I'm mirrored. You're not. Welcome to United Opposition, where people who are in opposition to each other ideologically can still be united as friends, and that is what we're trying to express. That's what we're trying to show with the show. How you doing, Marshall?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing, Scott?
Doing great. For those you don't know, and we've been following the show for a couple of times. Marshall and I are friends way back from high school, however many years ago, right? We just did our 30 year 2 years ago, something like that. Dang. That was fast.
Yeah, I know. It's been a minute.
Yep. But of course, the show here, 511 Media show, sponsored by Covenant Coffee. Hope in a cup. Ready?
There you go, man.
There we go. Yeah. We want to support that and what they're doing with their now 2 locations. Now I know that there's one. I'm going to look off screen real quick to some people that are here in the studio. Is the second location open already? Across the street, it is open. 2 locations open, and great coffee, great going over there. But also what they do, supporting what they do, how they help emancipated foster children. You know, you hit that 18 and suddenly you're out of the foster system, but you're not necessarily ready to be on your own. And who's taking care of you and what's going to happen? And this is what they want to do. They want to help those kids who are that way, who are in that situation, who are in that unfortunate situation, and want to be able to support them. And so they give them jobs, they give them training, they mentor them, and do some really great things. So that's what you're supporting with your cup of coffee at Covenant Coffee.
There you go, man.
All right, so here we go. Something happened in the news, right? Something happened in the news. So for those you don't know, I don't actually have the news at my house. So I don't keep up with the news. My wife and I decided when we got married almost 26 years ago, that we didn't want to have a TV in our house. So no TV, no news. It still filters in. We still get it. We still hear about stuff, especially in social media and things out there. But we're just not plugged in with the TV always on the news and just getting bombarded with all of that. So I haven't been tracking what happened in the news until it happened. So tell us a little bit about, I'm sure you probably tracked it a little bit more, Marshall. Tell us what happened recently in the news.
Yeah, well, I think that since the topic is Trump, we'll talk about the trial.
Yes.
And in particular, he was convicted on, I believe, 34 felony counts of basically lying and concealing a hush money payment that he made, which is a felony. I think it's what they call a class 4 felony under New York law, which is like the lowest level of felony.
Just make it a felony.
Yeah, just enough to make it a felony. And
so that happened Thursday night, right?
What's that?
It happened Thursday afternoon, Thursday night.
Yeah, it happened late last week, and so now he's a convicted felon. Technically, he's yet to be sentenced.
We follow we follow what we do. You tell us your position, what you feel about this. I'll tell where I stand, and then we'll talk about it.
Yeah, well, on the one hand, I celebrate it. I think it's fantastic that we've held a public official accountable. On the other hand, I suspect that it's going to be counterproductive. I think that it smacks a little bit of a witch hunt. I think there are other things that Trump has done that might need more attention or more scrutiny than this particular, what really, in my opinion, may have turned out to be a circus. Not that I condone what he's done. I praise the jury for finding him guilty. If he's guilty, he's guilty, and we need to hold all public officials accountable and hold all of them to the same standard, not just the ones we dislike. And I don't know that he'll actually go to prison. If I were the judge, I would not necessarily send him to prison, because I think that would just be, on the basis of this particular case, I don't know that that's necessarily reasonable. Should he be locked up? Yeah, but probably for some other things. But he also deserves to stand trial for those other things, and he needs a chance to defend himself and to have his day in court.
Your opening 30-second statement has gone pretty long.
Well, and what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So we need to hold all public officials accountable the same way we've held Trump accountable. So,
all right, I think that this is a politically motivated attempt to simply attack a political enemy.
mhm,
That despite, I don't want to say despite, but I don't doubt that he's guilty. I don't doubt that he did what was done. I believe that it is
mhm,
common practice across the board, and this is cherry picking one person in this one area for political motivated reasons, and I have a problem with that. You just said, keeping, holding a standard, but if
mhm.
we're not holding a standard, then should we, like, if we don't ever hold any political person responsible for this type of action, but then we single out one person, does that make it wrong? I think it does. So there we go.
Well, one way to look at it is you could look at it like the traffic cop situation, right? Everyone's speeding, but he got you. And does that make your conviction for speeding, or does that justify your speeding? Does it make your conviction wrong, or does it justify it? And the answer is no.
No,
You're still busted. You're still going to have to pay the fine or whatever, and you
that is
deserve
true.
that.
However, if nobody else has been pulled over at all, but you're the only one who's been
Mhm.
pulled over
Mhm.
because specifically that police officer knows you and has something against you, and now they've never pulled anybody else over for this, but now they're
Right.
pulling you over for this, does that change the situation, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it does. I would agree with you there. However, if I want to play the devil's advocate here, can't I say, but this man is the highest public official. He's held the highest public office
Not
in
right
the
now.
nation. And
Not right now.
therefore, should he not be held to the highest standard?
Not right now, and not while that happened, allegedly. Well, I can't say allegedly anymore. It's actually convicted, so you don't have to say allegedly anymore.
Yeah.
But
So,
not when that happened, and not during this trial. So no.
mhm, mhm. So at the end of the day, one of the problems that we have is we have two tiers of justice in America in general. There's one level for the wealthy and one level for everybody else. And the reason why you have these two tiers is there's more politics, money, and influence at the top level. So it's a little bit more dynamic. It's a little bit more slippery for people. The wealthy people have access to better attorneys, better legal defense teams, better strategies, the things that the ordinary folks don't have access to. And so as a result, a person like Donald Trump can delay a case, delay a case, delay a case. He can bring an A team of lawyers in and really have the absolute best defense presented. Whereas a person like you or me, if we were accused of a crime and went on trial for it, we would not have access to that level of defense or any of that. And I think that's a fundamental injustice. And I don't know how to correct it, because on the one hand, yeah, if you have money and wealth, you're going to deploy that in your defense. Who wouldn't? But I really despise the fact that we have this two-tier justice system in America. And then, as I think you're going to agree, that we appear to be a little selective with how we apply the justice. Now, I'm certain Trump isn't the only person to ever be tried or convicted for charges like this or similar to this, but you're right. This is certainly a politically motivated case.
Not only that, this is common practice. I doubt that there is a politician in any of these places where they're talking about this who hasn't done this. And I don't believe that there's, a big urgency to try them for this type of stuff. But because they could not, because they felt they could not beat this person in the polls, they wanted to find another way to get him removed from the polls. And this is where I do feel that this is an attempt to politically remove a candidate from a presidential race. Like that the motivation of this was, let me find anything. The police officer just wants to pull you over. They just want, I know who that person is. I recognize the car. I recognize the person. Their tire touched the line. I can pull them over for unsafe driving. Like and I have a big problem with that. And I think that that's for me, guilt or not is irrelevant in this case because of the pettiness of it. Because of the pettiness of this is something every single one of them does. They're only fainting like, oh my gosh, this is awful. This is terrible, because they're so scared of this person in office. They're so scared that the people want this person in office that they, instead of trusting it up to the people, they are willing to then use the government and use the authority of the government to find a way to remove this person from the political race because they're afraid that the people are going to choose them. And I think that's dangerous, especially and that's active. I mean, you think an official Biden rally happened across the street from this conviction, not just people, but like an official Biden rally. So this means the current president and someone running for the presidency is using this as part of their campaign.
Oh, and they certainly will. They certainly will. They always do.
Yeah,
Things
but I'm
like
just
this. Yeah.
Instead of distancing and saying, let the justice system do it. It's like, there we go. We did it. Like, we're part of it. We're part of it. And that, what I feel is most, especially those on the right, people who are on the fence of whether or not, Trump is a good person. Obviously he's not, but whether or not it's good for the country for him to be president. I think economically we've seen that that's true. I think that oh my gosh, Trump is going to have access to the button. And then for 4 years, everything was fine. And then Biden comes in. It's like, oh my gosh, everybody says, oh my gosh, about the opponent they don't like. But I think that those people who may have been on the fence about Trump are looking at this as, okay, this is political. This is like Banana Republic, political, go after, use the law. And I think it's going to solidify the people who are on the fence about Trump. I mean, you saw what happened. He raised $50 million in 24 hours and shut down the website, crashed the website because he raised so much money, because this is going to have an opposite effect, because those on the right, we feel like this is a political attempt, because you can't beat him in the polls. So you're going to do everything you can, and you're going to use the might of the justice system nefariously to take out a political opponent. And that's what it feels like. That's what it looks like. But I can't get around the fact of, I looked at the whole thing. I heard all this stuff, everything that everybody's saying, and all the instructions of this was unfair. This was unfair. This was in the instructions. I actually skimmed through. I can't say I read, but I skimmed through every single point of all 55 pages of the judge's instructions and I'm like, I don't see what the right is complaining about. I really don't see that in the instructions. But again, I don't have a lot of judicial. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not, someone who was in the studio on Thursday and they were talking about it is a sheriff, and they sit through court cases all the time. They're in there. They know the procedures. And he was bringing up things that I didn't know. He was bringing up things like the instructions that were given. Like, it was very limiting. Like the judge was actually really, tying the hands of the jurors and giving them instructions that don't normally happen, and really confining it so that it really could only come to one, it was judged by the jury, but the instructions made it so everything that the judge did in the courtroom made it so that there really was no other thing that they could do other than there's gag orders. There were things they couldn't say, things they couldn't read. They couldn't have a copy of his instructions, all kinds of different things. And all of it strictly legal, but just set up to make sure the proper conviction came through. So it just feels like it's unfair, but everything also looks like it was by the book.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think all the Democrats had to do was run somebody a little bit more living than Joe Biden. And had they, not put a zombie up there, I think this would have been a blowout. It was the Democrats to lose, and they still might very well win, but it's a question mark. It's at least in the realm of the coin toss, because they decided to stick with someone who is in there. And I don't know what happened within the Democratic Party, but I think the Democratic Party is, I'm not happy with it. I'm certainly not a registered Democrat, as left-wing as I am.
Nor am I.
I am not a fan of the Democratic Party, and I believe they have plenty of corruption and issues within their own ranks. I think Trump conviction is a good start, both for him as an individual. He needs to be put on trial for other things he's allegedly done, but it also needs to apply to all of these other politicians. Yeah. Take Hunter Biden, right? The president's son. He needs to go to his trial.
I want to lead us into this question, and I think maybe we can focus on this for the rest of the show, because I am curious. I'm curious about this, where you stand, and I'm willing to discuss it, because I'm not quite sure where I stand. But there are things that politicians and people in political offices or appointments or wherever they're at, they could be, maybe they're not elected officials, but they're appointed by elected officials. There are things that they do that are criminal. There are things that happen. There are things that we can get conspiracy theories or whatever, but you can have the leader of the FBI do something wrong, the leader of the IRS. You can say that, people could point to this and say this was a misrepresentation of justice, that the attorney general should, was breaking the law, or should be, and there are times when people in those positions do something illegal or do something that should be prosecuted. I mean, you look at, Hillary Clinton and her office literally taking hammers to phones and smashing them to hide the evidence that are on there. Mm-hmm. At what point is it good to bring those people to justice? Or at what point is that just because when the Democrats are in power, they're not going to prosecute the Democrats. When the Republicans are in power, they're not going to prosecute the Republicans. So when a Republican comes into power and decides, you know what, we're going to prosecute all the people on the Democratic side that committed these crimes, is that justice, or is that just political revenge?
Yeah, well, if you get into that pattern, it's definitely a pattern of tit for tat revenge, However, we get into sort of an ontological question here. Should leaders be held to the highest standards of ethics and accountability? And again, it gets back to wisdom. It depends. Depending on the situation and the circumstances. For example, if you're in a time of war or a time of national emergency, you might be a little bit more flexible with rules, because at the end of the day, the safety of the nation and the safety of the citizens is paramount. So there's going to be times and occasions when you might say, you know what, we're going to go ahead and look the other way. On the other hand, there are going to be times and occasions where I think you're going to enforce the letter of the law right down to the letter of the law. And it just depends. The Roman Republic gives us a good example of this. And remember, our government is somewhat founded on the idea of the Roman Republic. In the Roman Republic, a person would hold the consulship, I think, for like 2 years or something. And there would usually be two consuls, a consul and a co-consul, if you will. And they both kind of shared power with the Senate. And the Roman Senate ran everything. And then you just had the two consuls to kind of act as executives. But the Romans also recognized that there would be times of national emergency, such as when there's a rebellion or an invasion. And when that would happen is they would take one of the consuls and they would make them dictator for 6 months. And under those conditions,
the story is in the movie Batman, The Dark Knight, where Harvey Dent's talking about that, said it was considered an honor to be chosen to be the person. Said, yeah, but the last person who did that was named Caesar, and he didn't give it up.
Right. But prior to that, you had Cincinnatus. The guy for whom this city of Cincinnati is named after. And I think also possibly Cornelius Sulla, but I could be wrong. But you had people who held this kind of power, and then they willingly laid it aside. But you had to make exceptions so that they could deal with the emergency. And once the emergency was ended, it was expected they would lay down the power. And in the case of, I think it was Cincinnatus, he went back to his farm or his villa. Cornelius Sulla bailed out and said, I'm going to go retire on the beach, because they knew to stick around was not good for the health. Julius Caesar didn't get the message,
To quote episode 9, somehow Palpatine returned.
Right? There you go.
I mean, that's what history has shown us, is that you give somebody power, we can't do that. But to go back to the question, if let's say if Trump wins and comes into power and says, okay, now we're going to prosecute all of these people who broke the law, would that be ethically wrong?
If he is also holding Republicans to the same standard, I wouldn't think so. I think he'd be draining the swamp, so to speak.
That would have to be right? Is it happening across the board, or is it only happening to your political opponents?
Right. So that's what I think alarms a lot of people and concerns a lot of people, and even people on the left. As much as we rejoice over the fact that a guy that we think is basically a lifelong serial criminal, draft dodger, and everything else. We're not fans of Donald Trump here, but we also don't want to see the justice system turned into a cudgel that's used to beat down people because they're simply because they're political opponents. We don't want to turn into a banana republic or a dictatorship or any of these other countries.
And the people on the right,
normal,
people on the right are saying that's what just happened. Do you think that's what just happened?
I think there's some of that in there, but I also think that he was legitimately convicted of crimes he committed. But again, it's a good start, and we need to, number one, convict him or put him on trial for the other crimes he's committed. But then we don't stop there. We have to do this across the board.
I was going to say, so you don't have a problem to start with one person. You're saying
well,
this is
if we don't go any further with this, if Trump doesn't face justice for any of his further crimes, and if no other politicians face justice for their crimes,
that's the thing right there.
Then I think we have a problem here. You know, I would be very disappointed.
So do you trust? See, here's the thing: those of us on the right, we really don't trust that that's what's going to happen. We don't trust that this is the start. We believe that this is the one person. We don't want this person. We're going to point everything we can to attack this person on crimes that are effectively fairly petty, barely a felony, right? It's only a felony there. It's not a felony in every state, right? What he did was a felony.
I don't know. It might be a felony in every state, though. but
I'm
it's a state crime, not a federal crime.
I don't think that we on the right, we don't believe that this is just the start of something. This was specifically targeted. Do you believe that this is the start? Do you actually believe that now it's going to go through and more other people are going to start getting convicted? Do you really believe that?
Nope. And that's the problem.
So then then if you and I, neither of us believe that that's what's going to happen, then how can either of us stand behind what just happened? I cannot stand behind what just happened because I don't believe that it's going to be equal. I think it was politically motivated. And yes, there was conviction. Yes, there were laws broken. Again, it's that traffic cop. It's everybody driving breaks these laws. Your tire crosses over that line every once in a while. That's actually a police officer can pull you over because you're not supposed to be. That's dangerous driving. And that all of us do that. And so I'm not saying I'm not saying that he's not guilty, and I'm not saying it's no big deal that he is guilty. I'm saying it's irrelevant to the idea of, is this the beginning or is this just a political attack? And since I don't believe that this is the start of actual ethically based across the board justice, I don't believe this is the beginning of that. This is just a political attack. So I don't feel I can stand behind what has happened here. You seem to be okay with what has happened, even though you know that it's a sham.
Yeah, well, it's not a sham. He actually did a crime, and this isn't a little crime like
Again,
you stray out of your lane on the highway. This isn't like that. This isn't incidental. This is something that he deliberately and knowingly did and conspired to do.
But the sham is not the conviction. The sham is not the evidence. The sham is the fact that they went after one person and they're not going after everyone. That's the sham.
Right. And I would like to see them go after everyone. And I'm going to be deeply disappointed. In fact, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be deeply disappointed that they should have gone after all of them. And they need to go after every single last one of them.
But since you know they won't, you stand behind this. How can you say this is a good thing since you know it won't be equal justice?
Yeah, but I do. Yeah, because he's actually been duly convicted of something that he knew was wrong and that he participated in and did anyway, thinking he was above the law. We need to set an example.
But we're not. We're setting the wrong example. We're
setting the correct example in this specific case, but we're not carrying that example further to other people. That's the problem. So it's a failure. It's not the trial itself is the system working the way it's supposed to. The trial and
I agree with you on that. I know that there are the people on the right who are saying that the trial itself was all. I couldn't find that. Maybe there's stuff in there. I know that a guest we had on last week when this happened, they're talking. He's a sheriff and he knows more about what happens in trials and in courts. And he was following it. And he was saying that the stuff that the judge was doing was very out of the ordinary, specifically setting it up for the conviction. Like there was instructions given and things like that. He said it was very limiting. What the judge did was out of the ordinary. I don't have any evidence of that. I don't know what procedures are. This was a person who's involved in court procedures all the time and was following it. So I'll take their word for it. But the idea is that I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with the idea. The reason I call it a sham. Again, what if two people did the same crime and we said, we're only going to go after this person and then let that person go? Would you be okay that person was convicted?
Yeah, if it's depending on the circumstances, yeah. Again,
But,
if
but,
you
but
knowingly and
again,
willingly
two
commit a
people,
crime, you
yes,
deserve your day in court.
right, but two
And
people
there's an
commit,
appeals process.
but I'm saying two people committed a crime.
Mhm,
But since this guy is my friend,
mhm.
I'm only gonna put this one on trial and convict him. Can you say that was justice?
No, that's an injustice. The conviction
Right.
is just. The injustice is letting the other person go. And there
Yes,
should be a
that's
consequence for doing that.
and that's where
Mhm,
when I call
mhm.
it a sham, I'm not talking about the
Yeah.
actual proceeding, even though it looks like there was some nefarious stuff going on in the proceedings.
Mhm.
I'm not coming against the proceedings. I'm saying the sham was you brought one person and you didn't bring the other person. I don't call that justice. I don't think
Well,
justice.
and I think this is a very rare case, Scott, where you and I agree. So next week we're gonna do the color of the sky.
Dude, they're not even in the room to hear that. We just agreed. So now
Next week, the
show's called
color of the
United.
sky.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I don't think this was justice.
Mhm. I think it was justice insofar as this particular case
The
was
letter of the law.
concerned, but I also think it's an injustice to stop here and to not carry it further. Again, to the rest of Trump's crimes that he allegedly has committed, and also to all of the other politicians who hold office from the presidency on down to your local dog catcher. Everybody needs to be held accountable.
Can you and I both say I know that it was a 2016 Trump like rallying cry or whatever, but I agree with it. Can you and I both say let's drain the freaking swamp?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And in fact, we have to, because if we fail to do so, the swamp is we're all going to get malaria. Let's
All
just
right.
put it that way.
So on there. So who do you think is more likely to drain the swamp, Biden or Trump?
Neither. They are both
Between
two
the two.
sides of the same coin.
Between
They
the
are
two.
both two heads of the Hydra. They are
Between
both
the two.
two heads of the Hydra. We've seen both of them in office, and neither one of them has done a damn thing about it. So I can't even say one or the other. That's like asking me, which is the right side of a coin.
Well, obviously, no, I can't say. All right. Well, there we are. United opposition has become united unity. we want the swamp drained. I do believe that the more likely side to drain the swamp is the conservative side, is the right. I believe the right is more likely to drain the swamp, and that's what I believe, and I think I've hopefully seen that. I don't know, but that's what I believe. And if there's one thing that we could do, this will be a whole nother discussion at some other time. But if we could just term limit everybody, oh my gosh, that would fix so many problems.
That would help.
Can I agree on that?
Yep, we agree on that too.
All right, united opposition has become united unity. We'll get together. See what we are in opposition on next week. But we hope to catch you then. This has been Scott and Marshall with United Opposition. See you next time.
Bye for now.